The air in the Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and quiet desperation. It was an atmosphere I had once known in academic circles, but this was different. Here, the desperation wasn't for tenure, but for the next quarter's profit margin. I, Elias Vance, felt like a foreign body in this ecosystem of tailored suits and predatory smiles. I was here for my wife, Serafina, or so I kept telling myself. My hand felt clammy around the stem of my champagne flute as Julian Croft, Sarah's boss and the CEO of Apex Financial, draped a heavy arm over my shoulder. His smile was a brilliant, predatory thing, all white teeth and no warmth. "And here he is, ladies and gentlemen," Julian announced, his voice carrying an exaggerated, booming enthusiasm that made the small circle of executives around us chuckle. "The mathematician who traded algorithms for adult diapers." End of. The laughter was uncomfortable, clipped. A few pairs of eyes darted toward me, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I stood still, the champagne in my glass barely moving. My gaze found Sarah at Julian's side. Her own glass had halted midway to her lips, her expression a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. She offered a weak smile in my direction but remained silent. Her silence was a roar in the sudden quiet of my mind. "Elias here was once the rising star at Columbia," Julian continued, his grip on my shoulder tightening just enough to feel proprietary. "Brilliant mind, published in all the right journals." He paused for effect, letting the praise hang in the air before twisting the knife. Then he decided family duty called. Noble, really. Threw away a promising career to change his daddy's bedpans. The ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and vaulted ceilings, suddenly felt suffocating. My father's Parkinson's was a slow, cruel thief, but it was not a punchline. My decision to step away from academia to be his primary caregiver, to ensure his final years were filled with dignity, was not a weakness. It was a choice born of love, a concept that felt alien in this room. "My father has Parkinson's," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I met Julian's gaze and held it, refusing to be the cowering academic he painted me as. "He doesn't need that level of care yet, but when he does, I will be there." Some of us define success beyond quarterly bonuses. Julian's practiced smile flickered for a fraction of a second. "An admirable sentiment," he sneered, "from someone living off his wife's income while playing with little math equations on the side." It was then that Sarah finally spoke, her voice strained. "Julian, Elias's freelance work is actually quite sophisticated. He's consulting for several data analytics firms." Of course," Julian said dismissively. His hand slid from my shoulder to my wife's lower back, a gesture of casual intimacy that sent a jolt of ice through my veins. "I'm sure it's fascinating work. Almost as fascinating as what we do with real money in the real world, right, team?" Several of his sycophants nodded obediently. Sarah's eyes met mine for a fleeting instant. In them, I saw a flash of something: embarrassment, guilt, perhaps even a warning before she looked away, back toward her boss. That was the moment. Not the public humiliation I could withstand that. It was the moment I saw the complete picture, the full equation laid bare. The way Julian touched my wife. The way she didn't move away. The silent, exclusionary communication between them. The expensive new dress she wore, one I'd never seen before, that hugged her form in a way that seemed intended for another's eyes. I maintained my composure, taking a slow sip of my drink. "Real money in the real world is ultimately just numbers, Julian," I said evenly. "And numbers have patterns. Patterns are my specialty." He smirked. "Is that a threat, Professor?" "Not at all," I replied, my voice a soft counterpoint to the ballroom's din. "Just an observation. M." He laughed, a loud barking sound, and turned back to his group. "This is why I love academics. They think everything is a theoretical problem to solve." On the cab ride home, the silence between Sarah and me was a chasm. The glittering lights of Manhattan blurred past the window, each one a stark reminder of the world she was thriving in, and the one I had seemingly left behind. "Your boss is a charming man," I finally said, the sarcasm a thin veil over my anger. "He's under tremendous pressure," she defended immediately, her voice tight. "The Meridian Capital deal has everyone stressed. He isn't usually like that. Cruel, condescending, handsy with his employees." Her head snapped toward me. "What's that supposed to mean?" It means exactly what it sounded like," I said, turning to look out the window again. "Just an observation." You're being paranoid, Elias, she shot back. Julian values my work. He's been mentoring me for the senior VP position. Is that what they're calling it now? Mentoring? The words were out before I could stop them. They tasted like acid. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising. You're just upset because he called you out on throwing away your career. Her words stung more than Julian's had because they came from her. They confirmed my deepest fears. I didn't throw anything away, Sarah. I made a choice to be there for my family, something you used to understand. And I've supported you. But it's been almost a year, Elias. The care facility has professionals. You could go back to Colombia, at least part-time. Instead, you're doing these random freelance gigs that are beneath your abilities while I'm carrying us financially. Is that what this is about? The money? I asked, my voice low. Or is it that I'm not impressing you and your Wall Street friends? That's not it, and you know it, she snapped, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. We rode the rest of the way in a heavy, toxic silence. When we got home, she went straight for the shower, a new routine after her late nights at the office. I sat alone in our darkened living room, the city lights painting cold stripes across the floor. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was an analyst, and my marriage had just become a data set. The variables were all there. The late nights, the new perfume, the emotional distance, the blatant disrespect. Patterns don't lie. But I needed proof. I needed a theorem. And unlike most betrayed spouses, I had the analytical skills to find it. For the next 3 days, I lived in a state of hyper-awareness. I was a human data collection device, my mind cataloging every anomaly in the established patterns of my marriage. Serafina's phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now always screened down or in her purse. The hushed, late-night phone calls she claimed were with her mother now took place in the guest room with the door closed. The intimate space of our marriage had been breached, and now it was being fortified against me. I wasn't just an outsider, I was the potential threat. The opportunity came on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was frantic, a big presentation for the Meridian deal looming. In her haste, she rushed out the door, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen island, the screen locked but the machine still humming. It was a crack in her new, carefully constructed wall of privacy. I stood there for a full minute, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was a line. Crossing it meant accepting that the trust between us was not just broken, but an illusion. But Julian's sneering face and Sarah's averted eyes at the gala flashed in my mind. The trust was already gone. I was just catching up to the reality of it. Her password had always been a variation of our anniversary, followed by her mother's initials. It was a sentimental artifact from a time when our shared memories were a source of security, not a vulnerability. On the third try, I was in. Her email client opened automatically. For a moment, I tried to lie to myself, pretending I was just looking for an email I'd sent her about dinner plans. But the lie evaporated when I saw the subject lines in her inbox. Most were innocuous Q3 projections, Meridian due diligence, but nestled among them were threads that made my blood run cold. One, from the day after the gala, was titled, "Last Night." I clicked. My hands were shaking. Julian, can still taste you. Meeting ran long but worth staying late. Your husband suspect anything? Sarah, Elias doesn't pay attention anymore. Too busy with his father and his little math problems. We're good. The casual cruelty of it, the dismissal of my love for my father and my life's work as little math problems, felt like a physical blow. I had to force myself to breathe, to keep reading. The conversation continued, planning their next rendezvous. Julian, Meridian execs coming in next week. I need to impress. Dinner at 11 Madison, then my place. Tell Elias it's a client meeting. Sarah, already planned for it. Bought something special to wear. You'll like taking it off. I scrolled further, my stomach churning. 8 months. 8 months of deception laid out in digital black and white. There were explicit messages, photos they'd sent each other that I would never unsee, and forwarded hotel receipts from her business trips. The sheer volume of the betrayal was staggering. It wasn't a mistake or a fleeting affair. It was a parallel life she had been living. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a car engine starting again in the driveway. She was coming back. She must have realized her mistake. My mind, which had been frozen in a state of shock, snapped into cold, analytical focus. There was no time for grief, only for action. I grabbed my phone, my fingers flying across the screen as I photographed the most damning emails. I documented their plans, their lies, their contempt for me. Then, with seconds to spare, I closed the laptop, placed it exactly as I had found it, and retreated to my home office. Moments later, Sarah rushed in, flustered. "Forgot my laptop," she called out, her voice strained with false cheerfulness. "Have to run. Big presentation today." "Good luck," I replied, my own voice a marvel of steadiness, a calm sea above a raging storm. After the front door clicked shut, I sat down at my desk, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The emotional shockwave was immense, a deep, tectonic shift that threatened to shatter me. But I didn't let it. Instead, I channeled the pain, the rage, the profound sense of loss into a single, clear objective. I created a new, encrypted folder on my secure cloud drive. I named it Evidence. I uploaded the photos from my phone. Then I opened a blank document and typed a single word at the top: strategy. I had always approached complex problems by breaking them down into logical steps. This would be no different. The grief could wait, the anger could be fuel. Right now, I was no longer a husband. I was a mathematician, and I had been presented with an equation of betrayal. My task was to solve it. Step 1. Gather more evidence. Every lie, every meeting, every transaction. Step 2. Secure my position. Financially, legally, and professionally. Step 3. Execute. The game had begun, and I would not lose. The digital evidence was a cold, hard foundation, but I knew it was incomplete. To understand the full scope of Julian Croft's world, and by extension, the world Serafina had chosen over me, I needed a human perspective. I needed to know what people inside Apex Financial truly thought, beyond the practiced smiles and corporate loyalty. My mind went back to the gala, to a fleeting interaction at the edge of the crowd. A woman from Human Resources, Audrey Reed, had offered me a look of such profound pity that it had felt unnerving at the time. Now I understood its meaning. She knew. Finding her contact information was simple. Convincing her to meet for coffee was harder. But I was persuasive, vaguely mentioning that I was concerned about the high-pressure environment at Apex and its effect on my wife. We met at a quiet cafe, far from the financial district, a neutral ground where the ghosts of Apex couldn't haunt us. She was nervous, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. "I shouldn't be talking to you," she began, her eyes darting around the room. "I'm not here to cause trouble for you, Audrey," I said softly. "I'm just trying to understand. I saw Julian and Sarah together at a restaurant last week, during a time she told me she was in a client meeting. It seemed unprofessional. It was a lie, a calculated probe to see how she would react." Her composure crumbled. "It's been going on for months," she confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush of exhausted frustration. "Everyone at Apex knows, but no one says anything. Julian fires people who cross him. He creates a culture of fear. And Sarah has benefited from this arrangement professionally," I stated, not as a question but as a fact I needed her to confirm. Audrey nodded uncomfortably. 3 promotions in 8 months. It's unprecedented. She's good at her job, Elias, but not that good. There was a long pause. I could see an internal struggle playing out on her face. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I suppose she saw what Julian and Sarah saw, a quiet, academic man caught in a terrible situation. But perhaps she saw something more, a decent person who deserved the truth. "There's more," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I shouldn't be telling you this. It's not just office gossip. It's potentially illegal." My senses sharpened. This was the variable I hadn't accounted for. "My brother works for the SEC," she explained, leaning forward. "He talks about the signs of financial manipulation, the numbers in our quarterly reports. They don't match what I see in the internal HR and payroll systems. The growth, the profit margins, it all seems too perfect, especially with the Meridian acquisition on the horizon. If the deal goes through, Julian gets a $15 million golden parachute." I finished for her, the pieces clicking into place. "Exactly," she said. "But if anyone with your kind of analytical skills looked closely at the numbers, they'd find the discrepancies. The problem is, no one at Meridian has." Her information was a bombshell, but it was still just a theory from an HR perspective. I needed data. I needed an inside source in the finance department. I thanked Audrey for her candor, assuring her that her name would never be mentioned. I asked if she knew anyone in finance who might share her concerns, someone trustworthy who had also been sidelined by Julian. 2 days later, I was sitting in a dimly lit bar, a world away from Wall Street, across from a man named Leland Rowe. He was a senior financial analyst, a numbers guy like me, with weary eyes and a nervous habit of tapping his fingers on the table. He had been with Apex for a decade, but was marginalized after he questioned some of Julian's aggressive accounting practices. It took 2 drinks for him to relax, but when he did, the story he told confirmed all of Audrey's suspicions and more. What Julian is doing isn't just unethical, it's fraudulent, Leland said, his voice laced with a mixture of fear and professional indignation. He slid a flash drive across the table. These are the internal financial projections from the last 4 quarters. Compare them to the public reports Apex has filed. The story is very different. I pocketed the drive, the small piece of plastic feeling as heavy as a block of lead. I could lose my job for this, he said, his voice trembling slightly. My career. I understand the risk you're taking, Leland, I said sincerely, and I will not let you down. As we were leaving, he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Watch your back, Elias. A colleague in the cubicle next to mine. She overheard Julian and Sarah talking about you last week. My blood ran cold. What did they say? Julian said something about keeping the husband distracted. Sarah seemed worried you might be getting suspicious. He told her not to worry, that you were too lost in your own world to see what was right in front of you. I nodded slowly, a cold, hard certainty settling in my gut. They were aware. They were actively managing me, treating me like a potential problem to be contained. It made my next moves even more critical. My affair with Serafina was no longer a private betrayal. It was now entangled with a multi-million-dollar corporate fraud. My personal quest for justice had just become something much, much bigger. For the next 3 months, I became a creature of the night. My days were spent in a careful performance of normalcy. I visited my father, playing chess and discussing articles I'd read, the familiar rhythm a comforting anchor in the storm of my secret life. When Sarah was home, which was increasingly rare, I was cordial but distant, a man preoccupied with his work and his father's health. She bought the act completely, attributing my detachment to the very things she and Julian mocked me for. But when the house fell silent, my true work began. Leland Rowe's flash drive was a Rosetta Stone of deceit. In my home office, surrounded by whiteboards covered in equations, I dove into Apex's financials. To an outsider, the numbers were impressive. To me, they were a symphony of lies. Julian had been systematically misrepresenting Apex's position, hiding high-risk investments in obscure shell corporations and inflating returns on mortgage-backed securities. It was a house of cards, painted to look like a fortress. Using the data from Leland and publicly available information, I developed a specialized algorithm. It was a beautiful piece of work, a stochastic model designed to detect patterns of financial manipulation across multiple data sets. The numbers didn't just suggest fraud, they screamed it. The model told a story of a company being hollowed out from the inside for the short-term gain of one man. But exposing the fraud was only one part of the strategy. I needed to secure my own position, to rebuild the life they assumed I had thrown away. This required playing a longer game on a different board. My analysis of Apex and their suitor, Meridian Capital, led me to a fascinating discovery. I identified a small, under-the-radar financial technology startup called FinAnalytica. Their core product was a risk assessment algorithm that was light years ahead of Meridian's own aging systems. FinAnalytica had the potential to disrupt Meridian's main revenue stream, but they lacked the capital to scale. I reached out to Cassia Ling, an old friend from my graduate school days who now ran a successful venture capital firm. We met for lunch, and the surprise on her face was evident. Elias Vance, she said, a warm smile spreading across her face. I haven't heard from you in ages. Sarah mentioned you'd step back from academia. Oh, you've spoken with Sarah recently? This was news to me. At a Women in Finance conference last month, she seemed to be doing incredibly well at Apex. I wondered what else my wife had been saying about me in these professional circles, likely painting a picture of a man left behind. I pushed the thought aside. That's right, listen, Cassia. I've been analyzing some market trends and came across a startup that might be in your sweet spot. I presented my findings on FinAnalytica, laying out a detailed mathematical model showing its potential market impact, carefully avoiding any mention of Apex or Meridian. Cassia, always sharp, was intrigued. 2 weeks later, after I gave a formal presentation to her investment team, her firm made a significant investment in Finanalytica. As part of the deal, I received both a substantial consulting fee and, more importantly, a small equity stake in the company. Phase 1 of my financial reconstruction was complete. The second move was more delicate. At a mathematics conference in Boston, a trip I told Sarah was for a low-level consulting gig. I encountered Dr. Richard Barnes, a former colleague who was now the chief risk officer at Meridian Capital. "Elias, good to see you," he said after his presentation on risk modeling. "Heard you stepped away. What brings you to a quant conference?" "I've been doing some independent research," I replied. "Actually, I'd love to get your thoughts on something." Over dinner, I laid out my trap. I described a theoretical scenario where a mid-sized financial firm might manipulate its balance sheet to appear more stable than it was, outlining the exact patterns I had discovered in Apex's data without ever mentioning a name. Richard's expression grew serious as I spoke. He wasn't just a former academic. He was a man responsible for protecting a multi-billion-dollar corporation from bad investments. "This isn't theoretical, is it, Elias?" I held his gaze, my silence a confirmation. He studied me for a long moment. "Does this have anything to do with the Apex acquisition we're considering?" Again, I said nothing. "You need to meet with my CEO, Sterling Hayes," Richard said finally, his voice grim. "If what you're suggesting is accurate, we need to know before this deal progresses any further." Oh. A week later, I was sitting in a plush leather chair in Sterling Hayes' corner office, a panoramic view of Central Park spreading out below. Hayes was a man in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Dr. Barnes speaks very highly of your analytical skills," he said, his voice a calm baritone. He seemed concerned about our pending acquisition. I placed a slim black folder on his polished mahogany desk. "This contains my analysis of Apex Financial's true position. My sources are anonymous, but every conclusion in that report can be verified through a proper forensic accounting investigation." His eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation, Dr. Vance." "It's not an accusation. It's a mathematical certainty," I replied. "The numbers don't lie. You're considering buying a house with a crumbling foundation and a fresh coat of paint." "Oh." He opened the folder, his expression shifting from skepticism to deep concern as he scanned the first few pages. He looked up, his gaze piercing. "Why are you bringing this to me?" This was the delicate part. "Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing that business is conducted ethically." He studied me, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "You're Serafina Vance's husband." The statement caught me off guard. "You know my wife?" "I've met her at several industry events. A sharp woman. Julian Croft speaks very highly of her." "I'm sure he does," I thought. "My marriage is my own concern, Mr. Hayes," I said, my voice firm. "My analysis stands on its own merits." He nodded slowly. "What do you want in exchange for this information, Dr. Vance?" I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. 3 things. First, a consulting contract with Meridian to help you transition Apex's quantitative models after the acquisition. Second, Julian Croft is to be removed as CEO immediately upon closing. And third, I paused. "I want to be present when you announce the acquisition at Apex's annual client gala next month." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "That's an oddly specific set of conditions." "I have my reasons," I repeated. He considered me for a long moment, the silence stretching out. "I'll have my team verify your analysis. If it checks out, Dr. Vance, we'll talk again." As I walked out of the Meridian building and into the crisp autumn air, I felt a sense of calm resolve. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. All I had to do now was wait for my opponent to walk into the checkmate I had so carefully constructed. The year that had passed since my public humiliation felt like both a lifetime and the blink of an eye. As I stepped into the Waldorf Astoria's ballroom for the second time, it was as if I was entering a memory. But this time, I was not a ghost at the feast. I was the arbiter of its conclusion. The gala was even more lavish than the previous year, a testament to the success Julian had manufactured. I wore a new suit, tailored to perfection, a silent armor for the battle to come. Sarah had been surprised when I'd agreed to attend, but seemed relieved. mistaking my intentions for a renewed effort to engage with her world. "You look good, Elias," she'd said as we were getting ready, a hint of the woman I once knew in her voice. "More like your old self." If only she knew how right she was. We arrived separately. She had to be there early for preparations. When I entered, I spotted her immediately, standing near the stage with Julian. His hand rested on her lower back, a familiar, possessive gesture. They were huddled together, reviewing speech notes, the picture of a power couple. To the rest of the room, they were the architects of Apex's triumph. To me, they were the subjects of my final theorem. I circulated, exchanging brief pleasantries. Audrey Reed from HR gave me a knowing, supportive nod from across the room. Leland Rowe from Finance saw me and quickly averted his eyes, a silent testament to the fear Julian still commanded. Sterling Hayes, the CEO of Meridian, arrived with his executive team, acknowledging me with a slight, almost imperceptible inclination of his head before being swept away by Apex board members. Shortly after, Julian found me at the bar, his confidence radiating like heat. He slapped my back as if we were old friends. "Alias, glad you could make it. Sarah wasn't sure you would." He leaned in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Saw that paper you published recently. Interesting little theory, though a bit academic for practical application, wasn't it?" He was baiting me, trying to reenact last year's humiliation. He hadn't even bothered to check his facts. I hadn't published anything in over a year. "Actually," I corrected him smoothly, "my last publication was on stochastic modeling in volatile markets. Quite practical, as it turns out. Several firms have implemented variations of my model." His smile tightened. "Is that right? Well, good for you. Must be satisfying to know your little math problems have some real-world value." "Oh, I've become very directly involved in the market recently," I said, my voice pleasant, my eyes holding his. "You'd be surprised." Before he could respond, Sarah appeared at his side, her hand briefly touching his arm in that familiar, intimate way. "Julian, the Meridian executives are looking for you," she said, then turned to me. "Oh, Elias, I was wondering where you'd gotten to." "No, you weren't," I said, my tone still light. "But that's okay. I think it's time for the announcements anyway, isn't it?" He checked his watch, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. "Yes, I should get up there. Big news tonight." He winked at Sarah before moving toward the stage. She turned to me, frowning. "What's gotten into you tonight?" "Clarity," I answered. "It's quite refreshing." The room quieted as Julian took the microphone. He was in his element, a charismatic fraud basking in the glow of his own deception. He spoke of unprecedented growth and an exciting future, masterfully building the tension for the merger announcement he believed would be his crowning achievement. As he spoke, my phone buzzed with a text from Sterling Hayes. "We're ready when you are." "And so," Julian boomed, "it is with great pleasure that I can finally announce publicly that Apex Financial will be—" "Excuse me, Julian." I stepped onto the stage beside him, my voice calm but carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. The crowd murmured in confusion. Sarah's mouth fell open, her face a mask of disbelief. Julian's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed under his breath. I took the microphone from his stunned hand before he could react. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and clear. "For those who don't know me, my name is Elias Vance. My wife, Serafina, works here at Apex." I nodded toward her frozen figure in the crowd. "I believe there has been a slight misunderstanding regarding tonight's announcement." From the side of the room, Sterling Hayes and his team began to move forward. "Apex Financial has indeed been acquired by Meridian Capital Partners," I continued, my eyes scanning the sea of shocked faces. "But perhaps not in the way Mr. Croft has been suggesting to his board and employees." Julian's face went from angry to alarmed as he saw Hayes approaching the stage. "Due to significant irregularities discovered during due diligence," I stated, letting each word land with precision, "Meridian has acquired Apex at a substantially reduced valuation. Furthermore, as part of the terms of the acquisition, there will be an immediate and total change in leadership." I handed the microphone to Sterling Hayes, who took it without missing a beat. "That's correct," Hayes confirmed, his powerful voice commanding the room. "As the CEO of Meridian Capital, I can verify that we have completed the acquisition of Apex Financial, effective as of market close today. Julian Croft is no longer CEO, effective immediately." The room erupted. Phones came out. Reporters in the back began typing furiously. "This is outrageous," Julian sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "You can't do this." "It's already done," Hayes said calmly. "The board voted unanimously this morning after reviewing our findings. The papers are signed." Two security officers appeared discreetly at the edges of the stage. They weren't for me. "What findings?" someone called from the crowd. Hayes glanced at me. "Our due diligence team, aided by outside consultants, including Dr. Vance here, identified numerous accounting irregularities that required immediate action. Dr. Vance will be joining Meridian as a consultant to oversee the transition." All eyes turned to me. I watched Sarah's face as the connection finally clicked into place in her mind, her expression shifting from shock to pure horror. I took the microphone back one last time. "Thank you, Sterling. And while we're making announcements," I reached into my jacket and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. My gaze found Sarah's across the crowded room. "Serafina," I said, my voice softening slightly, though it carried through the silent hall. "These are divorce papers. I've known about your affair with Julian for months." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Time seemed to stop. I walked down the stage steps and through the stunned crowd, stopping directly in front of my wife. Her face was ashen, drained of all color. Her hands shook as she took the envelope from me. 8 months, Sarah," I said quietly, for her ears only. "All the late nights, the weekend emergencies, it's all documented. The emails, the hotel receipts, the photos you sent each other. My lawyer, Preston Cole, has everything." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "And yet, here we are," I replied, my voice devoid of malice, only a profound finality. Julian, who had been arguing with Hayes, suddenly broke away and lunged toward me, his face a mask of pure rage. "You smug son of a bitch. You engineered this whole thing." Security moved quickly to intercept him, but not before he grabbed my arm. I turned to face him, my expression calm. "Yes, I did," I admitted, my voice clear and steady. "You mocked me for giving up my career to care for my father. You humiliated me while you slept with my wife. You forgot something critical, Julian. Mathematicians understand patterns. We see connections others miss. We solve problems." I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And you and Serafina became a problem I needed to solve." He was pulled away, shouting obscenities as the crowd watched in fascinated horror. I turned and walked away from my wife, from my old life, and toward the exit. The equation was solved. I stepped out of the Waldorf Astoria and into the cool, cleansing night air. The cacophony of the gala, the shocked whispers, Serafina's silent tears, Julian's impotent rage faded behind me, replaced by the steady, indifferent rhythm of New York City. I hailed a cab, giving the driver the address of my new apartment, a place that was mine alone. As we pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of Sarah through the grand windows, a solitary, statuesque figure, lost in a sea of chaos she had helped create. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang, not of regret, but of acknowledgement for what we'd once had. Then I thought of her words in the email, his little math problems, and the feeling vanished. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and new beginnings. 3 weeks after the gala, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Genevieve Croft, Julian's wife. She was elegant and poised, with eyes that held a weary wisdom. "I wanted to meet the man who brought down my husband," she said, her voice a dry, sharp instrument. I invited her in, unsure of her intentions. "You did me a favor, Dr. Vance," she said, cutting through any apology I might have offered. "Julian's affair with your wife was just the latest in a long string of betrayals. This, however," she gestured vaguely, "the SEC investigation, that was the final straw." "SEC investigation?" I feigned surprise. She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Don't play innocent. I know you submitted the whistleblower report. I have friends at the commission. They didn't name you, but it wasn't hard to connect the dots." She studied me. "When I first heard what happened, I was furious. Then I realized you gave me the push I needed to leave a marriage that died years ago. We formed an unexpected alliance that day, sharing information that streamlined both of our divorce proceedings. My own divorce from Sarah was finalized with minimal conflict. My lawyer, Preston Cole, had presented her with a summary of the evidence I had collected. Faced with the mountain of incontrovertible proof, she didn't contest anything. She took the brownstone, as I had offered, and I heard through the grapevine that she'd taken a position with a smaller firm in Boston, seeking anonymity and a fresh start. Part of me wished her well. The rest of me didn't think about her at all. 2 months later, my new life had taken shape. I was back teaching a graduate seminar at Columbia, the familiar intellectual rigor a welcome balm. My consulting work with Meridian had proven more challenging and rewarding than I'd imagined, allowing me to apply my quantitative skills to real-world problems. Julian, as predicted, was formally charged with securities fraud. He entered a plea agreement that included crippling fines and a 5-year ban from the industry. His name was poison on Wall Street. Most importantly, I moved my father to a new care facility just 10 minutes from my apartment. His condition had its ups and downs, but now I was there for more of both. He seemed more engaged, his eyes brighter. During one of our weekly chess games, he captured my queen with a brilliant move I should have seen coming. "You got sloppy," he said, his eyes twinkling despite the tremor in his hands. "Too confident." "A valuable lesson," I acknowledged, studying the board. "Like the one you taught Serafina and that boss of hers?" he asked casually. I looked up, surprised. "You knew about all that?" "I may have Parkinson's, Elias, but my mind still works. And you're my son," he said, moving his rook. "Check. I know when you're plotting something complex." I shifted my king out of danger. "I didn't set out for revenge, you know. I just refused to be their victim." "There's a difference," he agreed. "One is reactive, the other is proactive. You have always been proactive." He watched me capture his knight. Was it worth it? I considered the question seriously, the events of the past year replaying in my mind. "It clarified things," I said finally. "It showed me what matters." "And what matters?" he asked, advancing a pawn. "This," I said, gesturing to the board between us. "The work, the intellectual challenges, being true to yourself, to your values." 6 months after the gala, I received a call from my venture capitalist friend, Cassia Ling. "Elias, are you sitting down?" she asked, her voice electric with excitement. "Fin Analytica, the startup I invested in on your recommendation. We've had acquisition offers from 3 different banks." She paused for dramatic effect. "And guess who just made the highest bid?" "Who?" "Meridian Capital. Sterling Hayes specifically mentioned your name as the reason they were interested." I'm sell. My initial equity stake, the small seed I had planted as part of my long game, had blossomed. It was now valued at over $2 million. My little math problems had turned out to be quite profitable. Later that week, I had dinner with Sterling Hayes to discuss the acquisition. "You've had quite a year, Elias," he remarked as we waited for dessert. "From caring for your father to bringing down a fraudulent CEO to developing a revolutionary financial algorithm." I never stopped working," I said. "I just changed my focus temporarily." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's what Croft and your ex-wife never understood. They saw your choice to prioritize family as a weakness. They couldn't see that the same analytical mind that made you brilliant at mathematics was watching them, calculating, waiting for the right moment. Most people underestimate those who step away from traditional paths." I agreed. "Their mistake," Hayes said, raising his glass, "to seeing the patterns others miss." I raised my glass in response. "To solving the right problems." Back at the chessboard, my father studied my last move. "Not a bad outcome then," he said slowly. "No," I agreed, moving my bishop to threaten his king. "Not bad at all. Checkmate in 3. He studied the board, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. "Always thinking several moves ahead," he murmured. "That's my boy." The game was over. I had lost a queen, but I had won the board. And as I looked at my father, I knew I had won back something far more valuable. I had solved for justice, and in the process, I had found the solution for myself.